Data-driven decision-making, why we need to implement the data action model in our school. According to Daniel Venables, the data action model occurs in 3 phases. The first is to gather and review data. The second is to identify learning and instructional gaps. And the third is to plan strategies and evaluate the effectiveness. There will be a few expectations for implementing the data action model. The first is participation. Each grade level team will work together to analyze their grade level data. We will be required to have 5 one-hour-long data meetings for the breakdown of data into smaller, more manageable chunks. And finally, the timeline. Teams will plan for 1 full grading quarter to allow for analysis, implementation, and evaluation. Let's take a look at data meeting 1. This is where we gather and review data. Teams will prepare Excel spreadsheets to depict their current data, and all team members will participate in the Notice and Wonder protocol. This is where we step back and we view the facts. What do we observe in the data? From there, we can ask questions and look for patterns. So when I look at this example, I notice that the scores decrease from goal objective 1 to goal objective 3. So it makes me wonder why. What is the reasoning behind the decrease in scores? This process leads us to generate exploratory questions. These questions should help answer several of the wonder statements. I came up with the question, how are we currently differentiating and scaffolding our multiplication lessons to meet the needs of all learners, particularly those with IEPs? This was something I noticed in the data and a question that I want to address. From there, we move on to data meeting 2, which is the triangulating of the data. This is where each member of the team gathers a variety of artifacts, such as lesson plans, teaching calendars, quizzes, classwork, and brings them to the table to observe whether or not they show learning gaps or instructional gaps. As you can see from our artifact tracking sheet, our team had many instructional gaps, which means there are improvements that we need to make in our teaching. Then we move on to data meeting 3, where we determine the gaps in the goals. This is where we bring together all of our learning gaps and all of our instructional gaps, and we prioritize them based on the largest impact. We want to focus on the gaps that affect the largest amount of students. So some of our learning gaps included key vocabulary and the lack of prerequisite skill, noticing that there was a deficit for many of the students. And instructionally, we have rushed pacing, a lack of modeling and visuals, and also no real documentation of accommodations. Once we prioritize all of our gaps, we are able to set a measurable learning goal. This is what we hope to achieve at the end of the 9 weeks. So our goal is that by the end of the multiplication unit, at least 70% of students will be able to depict multiplication word problems using arrays with at least 80% accuracy on 3 out of 4 assessments. Data meeting 4 is where we plan for the action. This is where we keep that SMART goal in mind and we use the resources of our professional learning community to research different instructional tactics and strategies that we can implement in our teaching to really focus on impacting our students. We want to make sure that we are incorporating new instructional strategies that are highly engaging to the students and bring in new technology and new strategies. And we want to implement all of these new tactics over the course of approximately 2 weeks to really give ourselves time to see if we can notice the improvements in our students' scores. Finally, all of this leads up to our 5th data meeting, which is where we get to evaluate the new data. We bring together as a team all of the new data at the end of the unit and we analyze it to determine whether or not we met that measurable SMART goal. Were the instructional strategies that we implemented effective? If they were, which ones had the greatest impact? And we need to make sure that we continue to incorporate those strategies into our teaching. There are so many benefits of using the data action model. This process provides true in-depth analysis of data and planning for effective instructional changes. Using that Notice and Wonder protocol is effective for examining facts in a set of data without any of those preconceived notions. Exploratory questions lead us to measurable goals, and by examining multiple artifacts, we are able to discern those underlying gaps in instruction and learning. And when we identify them, we can make the instructional changes to address the gaps and improve learning. And finally, this whole process encourages collaboration of team members and the sharing of resources to truly benefit all students. Finally, there are a few things that we need to consider upon implementation. We need to be able to provide consistent meeting times for grade level teams for those 5 one-hour long meetings. Teachers must keep in mind that they will be collecting the data and all this process over the course of 9 weeks or one full marking period. Teachers must have access to the resources of a professional learning community because that is how we grow as educators. Technology use, particularly with Excel, is a must, and everyone must be flexible and keep an open mind in order to change and adapt their instruction. But all in all, I highly encourage that we use the data action model in our school because the benefits far outweigh any of these other considerations.